Welcome to the Property Elite podcast. I'll be your host, Jen Lehman, chartered surveyor and co-founder of Property Elite. Stay tuned each week for more on industry hot topics, market updates and new RICS guidance.
I'm Ytzen van der Werf, and I'm a senior lecturer at UWE Bristol. Senior lecturer in real estate. That's my official title, which basically means that I'm teaching masters and undergrad students, third year undergrad in my case. So I'm doing that for about 6 to 10 hours a week, which is in UWE terms or in university terms, that's nearly. That's not full-time teaching. It's sort of half-time teaching. And besides that, I'm program leader of the Masters in Real Estate Management and the Masters in Real Estate Finance and Investment. 2 master programs at UWE that have quite a bit of overlap. So there's only a few modules that are different for the two programs. And we run those courses in attending mode. So students come into the classroom. And we do a distance learning, and mainly as a distance learning, we are one of the few in the UK that run our programs distance learning. I'm not going to mention any other names, but there's one big university that does basically everything distance learning. So that's our biggest competitor. For the students in the classroom, bachelor's or masters, there are many more universities that run real estate courses. That's basically what I'm doing at the moment, but I haven't done that my whole life. I started as a real estate valuer and agent in the Netherlands in 1997. So what is that? About 27 years ago. Did that for about.
Scary.
Yeah, it sounds scary indeed. About 4 years of active real estate agency and valuation, and then I went into more of a consultancy role at a firm which is probably comparable to, let's say, Deloitte Real Estate and PwC and Ernst & Young. So not necessarily set up as a real estate firm like the CBREs and the JLLs of this world, but more management consultancy style work. Yeah. But still in property, still in commercial property. Done lots of various projects basically over the course of about 11 years. Mm-hmm. And then we came to the UK as a family in 2011 for the first time, and I took the masters myself. So I was sitting where all my students are sitting at the moment.
Oh, amazing! So you know what it's like to be like in their shoes in those places.
I remind them of it every now and then. So I know what they're going through, and that might help. It's hard to tell, of course, if that helps the good teaching. I think that the combination of having worked in practice and now being in academia, and then maybe on top of that, having been there as a student in their shoes as well, does help, and the students seem to like it.
I think so as well. What made you want to take that step into teaching?
Well, yeah, some things are a little bit coincidental. I think we came to the UK because my wife, who's academic as well, had a postdoc position at the University of Bristol, so the other one, and I basically had to make a choice. But I was going for some work in the UK, but we were only going there for a year, so yeah, it's not much that you have to offer. Then you should find a project or something. Yeah. But I took the choice to go after my master's. In the Dutch system, we didn't really have a master's because it didn't really exist back then in the 90s. So it would add something to my CV, to my profile. And real estate was the obvious choice because I had been working in the real estate industry for about 15 years then. Yeah. So which was a really nice time, and I could apply all my practical knowledge, get a theoretical basis on top of it, and more specifically a UK theoretical basis, which is slightly different from the Dutch situation. It's not too different, but some things, for instance, legal, all the whole legal system and the fact that leases are structured slightly differently over here makes a lot of things in real estate slightly different, including valuation. So that was really really interesting, and it did spark my academic interest a lot more. And I can't say I sort of really enjoyed it back in the 90s, but this time I enjoyed it a lot more, and it led to me starting to work as an academic, which I've done over the last.
Sometimes things just click. Like I was saying with the RICS system, did a bachelor's degree in architecture, did a master's in construction project management. And I actually got asked by the university I studied at to lead a module afterwards. And it didn't end up happening because my day job was really full on at the time. But then when I did my RICS chartership, that's the point where that love for teaching kind of clicked for me. So I've been a consultant for Property Elite since like literally a month after I became chartered myself, because that was like, yes, I'm passionate about this. I want to share the knowledge. I want to kind of find the way to help guide other people through this quite complicated journey.
And we love that as well. So we've got most of our lecturers are full-time or part-time employed by UWE, but quite often we have somebody in who doesn't have a full-time or even a part-time position at UWE, but like you said, does take the responsibility of either leading or teaching on a module. So that does happen. What happens slightly more often is that people come in for guest lectures, and even that is always a nice break from, let's say, from us practitioner academics that do it day in, day out, and you create a certain relationship with the students where let's say they might not value you as much anymore as they might need to do. So they are really surprised positively by the practical knowledge, of course, that people have that are currently working in the industry, and the stories that they can tell. I think, that's probably, if you would describe the ideal lecturer, specifically in a subject like property, which is very practical, you would like to have somebody with, let's say, 2-3 days a week in the industry and 2-3 days a week in academia. That would be sort of the ideal set of lecturers.
Totally, because they're then like so in touch with what's actually happening, like boots on the ground, and they can bring all of that knowledge and the case studies and the learning over to what they're then teaching. Yeah,
and we've got a few of those, and Stuart Pousland from Evans & Young is coming into the classroom relatively often. He ran a module last year. We've got a guy who worked at a Somerset Council who's doing a module for us for the last 2 years. He's been teaching on that module, and then, as I said, quite a few guest lectures that come in and to showcase the things that they're doing. Of course, making a little bit of marketing and publicity for their own firm. That does happen, but that way students get to know the players in the industry as well. And I'm sure that most students will know the big 7 or the big 10 or whatever you call them, but the smaller to medium enterprise companies out there are less well known, and it's good to have them in as well.
Definitely. But I also found as well, having done the kind of like bachelor's then master's degree, the big thing that the bachelor's degree was kind of lacking was getting your head around what a job actually looks like. Like for me, doing architecture, you kind of learned a lot of the theory behind things and learned a lot of like the spatial awareness and the mindset that was needed. But I came out of that degree with absolutely no understanding of what working in practice in the construction industry would look like. And when I started my first graduate job, I was just totally baffled. But then the thing that the masters really gave was that integration into, like, through the guest lecturers and the fact that a lot of the kind of course leaders were also working in practice. You start to understand what a career could look like and what directions you might go in and what the possibilities for jobs are and possibilities for specialization. So that's such an amazing way to add value for your students.
And we do that as well. We realize and recognize that as well, and we don't want to just give it to the master students, because people working in property don't all go through a master's in real estate. So many of our undergrads have the let's say, the theoretical basis and the theoretical tick for the RICS accreditation. If they've got a bachelor's degree in real estate, they can become RICS accredited, as many of our listeners will know, or your listeners. So they don't necessarily have to do a master's after that. And we want to give those undergrad students a grasp of what working in property means as well. And we've always realized that probably, and I'm sort of guessing top of my head, 40-50% of students coming to UWE has some relationship with property through family, uncle, aunt, mum or dad. So they probably know what it is on a day-to-day basis, and more importantly, they've got contacts, so they can get some work experience through their family or friends through their network, basically. But some others don't have that. And 2 years ago, we've set up a UWE Bristol real estate mentoring scheme, where we've basically asked as many people as we could in the industry whether they would spend an hour every quarter with a student at UWE to make them understand what it's like to work in property, and to give them potentially some flavor of what a day-to-day job entails. Initially, it's a conversation, a bit like the conversation that we're having at the moment. But if the student is proactive, and if the student is after a little bit more, then clearly it could lead to some shadowing, to some work experience, to the next step, the next chain in that network. Because it doesn't have to be just Ytzen talking to Abigail Blumzon, but I could ask you, because you're in the construction business, which is maybe not my thing, but you might know somebody who is actually doing valuation, which is more what I like. So please, Abigail, introduce me to the person that does valuation, and then it starts building. It's a bit like a stone in the water, and the rings go further and further and further.
Oh, 100%. And actually, one of the questions I wanted to ask you was the kind of what you felt the three main kind of skills that the UWE course would give students, other than the actual course content. So if that was one of them, what would you say another two were?
Yeah, that's a good one. Yes, skills it's always maybe a little bit harder to define what a skill then is. But what we do with our masters and undergrad students is we make sure that they know how to present themselves. So that is through presentation, it's through negotiation exercises that we run in some modules, and it's also, let's say, the first steps in networking. So how do you talk to people? How do you prepare if you go to a session where you might not know everyone, or you probably don't know everyone that's coming there, but you might know some names. Make sure that you prepare to have some form of discussion, some elements that you want to talk about in your bag. Just as a tip, what should students do or be, and how should they train themselves? I would say, one, be yourself and just stay yourself. Don't start blowing yourself up and making yourself bigger than you are. Because if you're yourself, it's a lot easier to talk about things that you do know and that you are passionate about and that you do like. So this is a sort of an interview tip as well, and this is the interview tips that we hear from the employers as well if we go there. And on top of that, what we notice as well recently, and I hear that from the industry as well, is the fact that students lack a bit of modeling skills. So it's a bit more technical now. So we're talking about Excel modeling skills. So being a bit numerical savvy as well, rather than just knowing your content, knowing your laws, knowing valuation technique, but being able to model that in an Excel environment. And then more recently, don't hear that too often back from the employers, I should say, a property technology in a wider sense. So you could argue that Microsoft Excel was prop tech 30 years ago when I started. but these days it's much more than that, and it could be AI, it could be virtual reality, it could be measuring using tools. So yeah, a lot of property technology out there, and we're touching on that as well.
That's really interesting, and it sounds like you're kind of really sort of on the pulse with teaching the skills and the kind of mindset that companies actually need from students who are graduating. And nothing's kind of being done in principle. It's all like, what skills is the market looking for? What's going to give you the best career for you? Yeah,
because it's sort of interesting, because we see undergraduates for 3 years, which is quite a long time. Well, not in your whole life, of course, but in terms of trying to give them that content basis, it's quite a long time. But we also realize that the knowledge that they need to do their job well, they need much more than those 3 years, and much of the content, much of the, let's say, the techniques or whatever, they will learn on the job. So what I would say, students, if students are listening, in those 3 years, make sure that you acquire skills even more than the knowledge, because there's not too many employers out there that say, well, if a student has a first, I will hire them. No, basically no one says if they've got a first, I'll hire them. It's nearly the opposite side. I rather have somebody with a 2.2 or 2.1 that has these and these skills. It's the skills, and maybe sort of the talent, if you take it to sport, that you can't really train. If those the talent or those skills or those personalities are not there, then you're not going to train that on the job. But the knowledge,
funny.
The evaluation.
Because that's actually something that I don't think entirely clicked for me until after I'd graduated. Like, I've always been a super academic person, and like getting a first in my degree was like, that was what I saw in my head as being my goal. As opposed to like, cool, so what like real life skills am I going to come out of this with? I have never ever been asked what grade I got on my degree, like ever. It's totally irrelevant. It's what skills have I got, what have I learned, what can I bring to project teams, what can I bring to my teaching. So it's very much you're like totally spot on. That was so nicely put.
I think it's very much an academic thing, and I think it's not good, to be honest, that if you're doing your GCSEs, you need to get all B's or all A's or whatever to get to your A levels and to do the job, to do the topics that you want. If you're then in your A levels, you need to get all A's or A stars to get in that into that university that has a little bit more name than another university. Then, if you want to go from your bachelor's to your master's, they quite often ask you for a 2.1 or a first to even start a master's, and then you start working, and it's not relevant anymore. So there's a weird disconnect, very weird disconnect there. And if we started teaching more skills, let's say from year 7 to year 11, and make sure that everyone's numerical skills are at the level that we want and we need it to be, or presentation skills, or dealing with money, or you name it, or even property technology. I think the students these days, and I'm talking about secondary school children, they're all working with a phone, but they're the end user of the phone. They don't learn how to, they learn how to create content as an influencer, but the one step before, so how do you create an environment where you could put that content, and where you could, do something with a database? Those skills are not really taught at the moment. So we do miss out a bit. But like I said, as much as we can do at university, we try to give the students some skills basics as basis as well.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. And honestly, it's so refreshing to actually have a conversation about it, because I think that it's not often discussed, actually, that focus on academia, on like getting the grades and coming out of it with a nice tick box, as opposed to like coming out of it with this brilliant skill set, which really should be what university and academia is about. Like that's the kind of core purpose, is teaching people how to operate in their specialist field.
Yeah. Maybe indeed. So at the secondary school of my son, in this case, they taught boys how to learn, how to learn to learn. So not so much about learn the content, but what are your learning strategy? What are your learning skills? And that's something that you can use for life. No matter what topic you're going to study later in life, or no matter what job you're going to do. We're all lifelong learners these days. So if you keep remembering yourself, this is the way I learn best, because not everyone learns in the same way, of course, and some people are more visual and some people are more, well, I need to write it down. Some others want to talk about it. Interesting one.
Oh, totally. I've got a much younger child. I've got a 3-year-old, and I'm already trying to instill that learn to learn attitude. But I actually I had a really lovely conversation with him and some of his like 3 and 4-year-old peers at nursery yesterday. I had it was a difficult drop off. He didn't want me to leave. I really needed to go to site. I do a lot of high-rise facade remediation work. So also dealing a lot with kind of property and property owners. And I was meeting some contractors for a walkthrough, but my son was like, no, Mum, you're not leaving. So I ended up sitting and talking to this group of 3 and 4-year-olds for like 15 minutes about what I was going to do over the day. So I was like, right, because I need to go see this really problematic building because, we know it's not been built properly. We know there's some really bad things with this building, and I need to go and meet a group of builders down there and figure out how we're going to put holes in this building. How are we going to, put up some big tall towers, and then we're going to make some holes in the building, and then we're going to take bits of the building out. And they were so engaged with this.
3, 4-year-olds.
3 and 4-year-olds. It was amazing. One of the little girls,
amazing.
We were talking about this, and like they were like, I was kind of just talking because I was in my head. I was like, I really need to leave, so I'm gonna talk my way out the door.
Yeah.
And then after about 10 seconds, the kids were like, brilliant, this is story.
You got them more engaged than you wanted, basically.
One of the girls was like, no, that's really bad. Maybe you could stick a unicorn sticker over it. And like, this is brilliant. Like, we're thinking outside the box now.
Really good. Big unicorn stickers.
It was such a nice little kind of engagement with kids, and it was a proper, because I love talking about what I do. I think it's amazing. I think construction and property jobs are so fascinating because
and that's an interesting one as well. We didn't really talk about the sort of the local networks that we have here in Bristol, which are great. So I'm talking about the Bristol Property Agents Association, for instance, and the Forum for the Built Environment. But also the Bristol Property Inclusion Charter that Carl Brown founded about 3 years ago, I think now. I think it was with Carl that we came up with an idea of improving inclusivity and diversity in the property world, because it's a really nice world, as you and I know, nice industry to work in, very varied as well. It's not just an architect and a builder and maybe a residential estate agent. There's so much more out there, but it's still quite underrepresented by some element or some groups in society. So what we came up with was the idea of basically showcasing the diversity of the job roles in schools or in environments where there's more diversity in people.
Oh, amazing. I need to catch up with you separately in that case about what you're doing with that, because I would love to do more of that locally.
Yeah. And which is great, because we now run 2 a year. So we've got a September and a March sort of session, and we just held a September session again at UWE. So we've done it twice at UWE, and one time we were at a school in South Bristol, where we talked to year 10 students who are sort of still at the point where they need to decide, where am I going with my life? So they can still choose their A-level subjects if they want to do A-levels or BTEC or something else, maybe college. And property is very unlikely one of their not preferred choices even, but even choices that they consider. So it's typically not really on their radar, unless mum or dad is in in the property world or in the construction world more often than the property world, probably. And that was the interesting conversation that we had with those students, because we told them about the importance of building your own network and make sure that you have some contacts. And then they typically say, "Oh, yeah, I don't have contacts." But I say, "What does Dad do then, or Mum?" And he said, "Well, he's an electrician." Oh, okay, fine. So he's an electrician. So he's very close to the property world, because all his clients are very likely people that are in the property world. They will be property owners or building owners or developers or in some cases just the end user. That might not help that much then, but if it is a landowner, if it's a property owner, then via your dad you can get pretty quickly to the next person. If there's a good relationship between your dad or your mum and that property owner, you can easily ask them to shadow them and so not your dad, but the property owner, shadow them for a day and maybe get some work experience. So it shouldn't be too hard, let's say, to get students, people from slightly less affluent backgrounds to be interested in the wider property world and maybe become architects or maybe become property agents or valuers or investors or developers.
I think the point you made about kind of the lack of visibility of what actually happens in the industry is so important, though, because I was definitely in that position when I did my own A-levels that, so as I said, I studied architecture, but that was very much all my teachers were going, "Oh, well, she's into art and she's into maths and she's good at physics, she's good at design tech, architecture." Yeah. And I did not, I had no idea that the job I now do, which I lead our regional office for a construction consultancy, lead a South Coast project management team. I didn't know that project manager in construction was a thing. Nobody would have talked about this.
And you can study it at university, definitely.
Yeah, well, totally. Yeah. It wouldn't have occurred to me that, as a young woman, I would have the capability to be in the job that I'm in now, because it just wasn't a job that I would have seen represented and seen people doing, let alone knew it existed. So that it's so important, like you say, just letting students know what the opportunities actually are, because how can you aspire to be in a job that you don't know exists?
And I think from a marketing perspective, the RCS clearly has a role to play here, and that they should probably take the lead and go for nationwide or maybe even global marketing campaigns. But I think everyone working in the industry has as much role to play. And if we can showcase the beautiful things that we do and the interesting work that's out there, because it's there are not too many jobs out there where you can be out and about and travel for, or not necessarily travel, but be in different places, different building sites or different properties for most of the week.
Like jobs in construction can open the door to different travel and experiences, and we're interacting with so many different stakeholders and user groups, different property types.
Yeah, definitely.
Because of the whole nature of property and construction, you can have two buildings that are identical in every functional way, but the fact that they're in different locations means that every part of the situation, legal and planning and land use and the neighbours are totally different. So you're having to learn how to work within this different situation. It's so fascinating. There's nothing boring about our job.
It's definitely nothing boring. The only downside of that maybe is that you talked about mobility and the opportunity to work in different parts of the world. If you're actually moving borders, if you're crossing a border, then it does make it slightly more difficult and potentially, well, even for somebody like an agent or something, it's not easy to, let's say, have a Bristol career and then even a move to London is probably already a bit of a step, because your total network and then the total environment is different, let alone moving yourself to Paris, even if that's possible within your CBRE career or something.
Yeah, and like you said earlier with the different legislation, I did a project once in the Republic of Ireland and one in Paris, and just navigating all of the different legislation and permits that are needed, the statutory considerations was an absolute minefield. Yeah. So like you said, with your own career, there's just a lot that you need to relearn.
Yeah. When I was at university, it made it very interesting to be able to compare and contrast. But that's just at university. So if I would make a little error, that wouldn't hurt anyone. It would hurt my grade maybe a bit, but that's it. But if you're doing it in the real world where there's so many liabilities out there and the chance of being sued, it is tricky. Having said that, we've had a few students moving straight after their careers to places around the world. I had a lady about 5 years ago who went straight after UWE to Dubai, worked for Knight Frank over there, and then maybe not coincidentally, one of my master students did the same thing about a year and a half ago. It was through that first lady, so it wasn't a coincidence. She basically put me on track of that job opportunity in Dubai, and I forwarded to the students. And one of them, South African guy, who thought, okay, I didn't come to the UK necessarily to work there anyway, so let's do Dubai.
Brilliant. And I guess as an employer as well, they were going in eyes open with the fact that they were hiring students who'd studied in the UK, that there was going to be an element of kind of finessing local knowledge and so on. Yeah. And what a brilliant position, like, for an employer to be in, saying like, I'm going to take students on and I will commit to kind of teaching them the skill set that's needed.
And that's basically proof of the fact that they are going after skills more than after content knowledge, because you will lack some content knowledge of the Dubai or the Australian market if you move out to Australia or South Africa or wherever, but that doesn't really matter. You've learned how to think, you've learned how to analyze, you've learned how to write reports or write emails or do presentation skills. You've got all that, as much as a local student would have, and yes, it will take maybe a little bit more time to train you up. So what I'm basically trying to say is that if you want that outside of the UK experience, then it's probably best to go after it as quick as possible, because then you're still at the same level as the local student. If you go 5 years later, the local has required a network there, has acquired knowledge about the local system, and then you're trying to catch up, and you bring your UK network to Dubai or to South Africa. Well, that might be interesting if there's international investment going on, but for the local market, it doesn't help. And so your network is basically, decreases from that 100% that you just build up in the UK to only 10 or 20% of this network is relevant in the area where you were. Which, if I take it more personally, I noticed as well when in 2011 or maybe a bit later, I thought, okay, I would like to work in the industry as well, but then you're 40 plus, so you should be at senior level, you should have a network, and I did have a network, but it wasn't in the UK. So
that's really challenging.
What are you bringing to the table?
So we touched a bit on some links to the RICS earlier, and it'd be really interesting to know how the courses at UWE link to things like the APC, other RICS qualifications, and links to other professional bodies. Like, what can students do? Where can they go with that?
Yeah, good question. I think the listeners, if they're already in the industry, will know that the RICS is still very important, and getting your RICS accreditation is also main driver for most of our students, because whether they're undergrads or masters, postgrads, our courses are RICS accredited for a few pathways. It's mainly the commercial pathways we train them up for, which doesn't mean that they can't do residential at all. For instance, if they go into a residential environment, they probably acquire enough residential knowledge over there, so they might be able to change. But we typically set them up for the commercial valuation, property finance and investment pathways, or planning and development, or development and planning, if you're doing property development and planning, which is a course, by the way, that we have discontinued. So we've got a few last students on the course, 1.5 years of students. But what I'm basically saying is that the theoretical background we provide for people to go after RICS accreditation when they go into practice. But they do need 2 years at least, probably 2.5 years of practical experience to work on all the competencies that the RICS requires them to have, and then sit that can we say dreaded APC?
It's got such a bad reputation?
Well, I don't know. I think let's say Property Elite will probably be happy that it has that reputation, because it will give you some work after. Some work from all those people that are trying to sit or going to sit the APC.
We saw so many different candidates through the APC journey. And from my side, like I said earlier, the process was such an incredible challenge, and just trying to, I was one of the only people in my company doing it at that time. There were a few other people who were sort of like had it on the back burner, but there was a lot of self-learning that went on in terms of what the process was. And so one of the biggest things I think that Property Elite actually helps people with is just sitting down and explaining, like, this is what the process is, this is what you need to do, these are the skill sets, because it is a bit of a minefield.
Yeah, and it's probably good to say that as a university, we don't really have a role in it. Well, we do in terms of trying to explain that process as well as possible to the students whilst they're here, and the things that they should do, let's say, relatively soon after they graduate and get that first job. But they'll probably hear that at Jones Lang or Savills or CBRE or Knight Frank as well. I think it might be slightly more important for master students that are already in a working environment, where they basically could start the RSS process from day one. So they don't need the MSc that they're studying on as a tick box to start the process. They do need the MSc before they sit their APC. So they need to finish uni first and then sit their APC, and you can't do that in the reversed order.
Yeah, absolutely. Something that we discussed as well when we were caught up on the phone the other day. So I've got a fair bit of knowledge into what courses UWE do. As a company, we've got a Bristol office and an Exeter office, and we're lucky enough to have a lot of UWE graduates, probably 20 plus people who kind of did a whole range of courses.
Yeah.
We're more construction consultant side than property, so I don't think it would be anyone who'd crossed your paths. But it'd be good to have a bit of a rundown of the main courses that you do.
Yeah. So as I said, I'm responsible for the Masters in Real Estate Management and Real Estate Finance and Investment. So very much real estate focused. Then we've got a Bachelor in Real Estate. So that's a 3-year undergrad. The Masters are basically 1 year, by the way, if you do it full time. Then we had a Bachelor of Arts in Property Development and Planning, but we've discontinued that, and we basically train the same students in the real estate course now. So we've tweaked the real estate course a little bit more to have a little bit more planning and development in it. Then if there are more planners, if they think about, let's say, I don't know, shaping the world, then it's urban planning they could go to. And if somebody's listening, there's a big demand for planners at the moment. So any planning department of a council, or even planning departments of the bigger firms, they are, well, let's say, screaming for people.
That's good to hear.
Even more than real estate at the moment, where in real estate it's those jobs or those roles that are perpetuative, like continuously, like valuation or property management. Those roles are, let's say, always in demand. There won't be big peaks and there won't be big troughs. But if you're more on the agency side, where it's transaction based, that goes up and down. And the last 2 years were not up, let's put it that way. So we would expect those roles to be more available over the next 2 years. There must be a point where transactions are coming back again. But and I'm talking mainly about the sales transactions here, by the way, because lettings are still there. Lettings are continuing, but there's just not too many sales going on at the moment. You touched upon construction. So we've got construction project management, I should say, undergrad and masters.
Brilliant. I think that's probably quite similar to the course I did.
Potentially, yeah, that makes sense. So again, the undergrads are 3 years. The masters is basically 1 year if you do it full time, spread over 2 years if you do it part time. Then we've got quantity surveying, same thing, bachelors and masters, and building surveying, bachelors and masters. And then you're probably moving a little bit more towards something like building service engineering. So we're more on the, let's say, the technical M&E side, the inside of the building, how all the services work and how you design them and how you build them. And then we go to the architecture side. So there's bachelor's and master's in architecture, interior architecture, product design. So we're now moving on slightly away from the property world. And I might have missed one or two, to be honest. But it's a wide range.
Amazing. I assume for anyone listening who wants to have a full list, is that available on the website? Absolutely.
So if you go to www.uwe.ac.uk, and then there's there's that glass at the top. Click the glass, and you've got a search bar, and anything that you put in there will lead you to a few courses, and some are just what we call professional courses. So they're basically sort of one-off modules. In our masters, we've transformed all the modules into professional courses as well. So you can take one if you want, because you need some background in, let's say, real estate investment and development. And all the bachelors and all the masters are there, and it's like one of those trees. If you click one, you get a few suggestions. So there must be a list somewhere as well, but then it will include nursery and dentistry and all the social sciences as well. So you might get lost a little bit in a
filtering through. Out of interest, what's the do students on all the different courses interface much between each other? Is there much kind of almost like cross-discipline working between them?
There is.
Courses?
Yeah, quite a few of our bachelor first year modules are taken by a few of the programs that I just mentioned. So that's where students are, let's say, forced to work together already. And one example is what we call healthy, sustainable communities. It's a 30 credit module in the first year where they work with a few programs together, and they're not allowed to just be in a group with real estate students or just be in a group with urban planners, because otherwise it wouldn't work. And a similar thing we have in third year, which we call collaborative practice, where we basically showcase that although you will be an agent, or you want to be an agent, you will work with a valuer, an architect, a construction project manager, etc. together. So they're put into groups, and they work on a cross-disciplinary, as you said, project, which requires all those different disciplines to work together, different views. And I must be completely honest, at the start of those modules, typically students don't really like it, because they think this is not what I signed up for. But if you ask them 2 or 3 years later, that's the module that they remember, and that's the module where they think, that's where maybe what you said at the start, that's where it clicked, that what I'm going to do is working together with other people, and I need to understand what their disciplines are and how they work, how they think, what's important for them, there's so many things that if you talk to agents, you can talk about those things for hours, basically. You can have beers and you can talk about yields and rents, etc. If you talk to a construction project manager, they couldn't care less. It's about other stuff. But measurement might be very important for both, for instance.
Totally. What an incredible way to bring value to the students, because that's one of the most important skills, I think, when you're working in practice, is having that understanding of how everything fits together. And, obviously people aren't going to specialize in everything, but understanding of course, if I need to know that bit of information on a project, that's going to be the sort of person I go to. But just having a kind of high level knowledge of how everything fits together is honestly, I think, one of the best skills. So amazing to hear that that's something you do.
It's an interesting one, because you sort of paint a picture between the spectrum of being more of a generalist as well, a little bit. There's collaboration there, but it's also, what do you want with your job? Do you want to be a specialist later in life and focus on a niche, or do you want to be a generalist? And you probably can sort of gauge from my story, I've been more of a generalist than a specialist. But I'm not necessarily saying that was the best choice ever, because I think that some people that do specialize in one thing sometimes or quite often seem to be more successful because you found your niche, and I assume that's something they like. So that would be the best tip to the students. Find that something that you like, and if you have something like that, specialize in it and become the authority basically in your area. And I think it's a quicker way to success than being a generalist. But maybe the generalist will last longer, because if you lose your job or let's say you're in telecom or on something and telecom stops, then what?
Yeah. For me, I think a lot of that is about how you define success, whether it's like kind of, you know, being able to make yourself as employable as possible versus kind of, I suppose, having the most enjoyable work experience and having people enjoying working alongside you. So I'm definitely a generalist, like very, very much. And for me, my success is kind of, do people see me as someone who they can go to with questions and concerns about projects? If I'm somebody who my colleagues and peers and people from other companies feel like, oh, Abigail will be a good person to ask that, because either she'll know the answer or she'll probably know someone who knows the answer. That for me, that's the marker of, am I successful in my career?
Yeah.
But it's such a personal thing, like what people see as success for them professionally.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and that's why there are still generalists and specialists probably, because not everyone is the same, and that's absolutely fine, of course.
Totally. I'm going to ask one final question before we wrap up, which is, what are 3 things that you'd give as tips to students starting their first job?
Yeah. But maybe a bit in line with what I said before, at university, if you're still at university, you can still sort of change the course of your life. Don't just go after your good grades. Just enjoy your university time. I think that's the biggest reason why you should go to university anyway to enjoy it, because otherwise start an apprenticeship and don't rack up 50k of debt or something. So enjoy it. And at the same time, make sure that you acquire those skills rather than just knowledge. So if there are exercises being set by lecturers that seem scary, engage with them, because that's where you learn. So that those presentation skills. So we had some issues, or not some issues. We had events in the past where we asked students to do an interview. So it was not a professional practice model, that module. That's the third one that we have where students work together, professional practice. And a few had to do a mock interview, and let's say 5-6 others just had to watch. Well, what are you going to learn from the watching? Do the mock interview. Be the one that sits there and that might make a fool of themselves in front of an employer, but who cares? They will learn most of it. So that would be my tip as well. So acquire skills rather than knowledge. And it sounds a little bit weird from a guy who's working at the university, but yeah, we're there to provide both to the students. And then the property world is still, quite a funny one. I think in property, experience is highly valued. So get some form of work experience, and whether that is through a placement year that our undergrad students can do between year 2 and year 3. You've got a year of work experience. That's absolutely great. That's sort of the max that you can get in your 3 years, or just a week or 2, or an internship over the summer between year 1 and year 2, or between year 2 and year 3, and that's all then property based, I would say. So an internship in property could be a residential agent. Doesn't really matter. Although most of our courses are setting students up for the commercial real estate world, commercial property world. Residential agency is agency. It is talking to people. It's picking up the phone. It's doing viewings. It's working with brochures and marketing material, etc. So. There's quite a few jobs out there on a Saturday to do viewings for one of the residential lettings or residential sales agents in the vicinity. Absolutely brilliant work experience, but that might not be for all. And then it's let's say work experience in general. And if you do that work experience, then think, what are the skills, what are the transferable skills that I'm getting from this work experience, from this job, that I can use in the property world. And if I say it like this, it might sound easy for somebody that has worked in the industry, and everyone that works in the industry will probably recognize it. But if you haven't yet as a student, you might not know.
Definitely.
That's why a mentoring scheme would probably give you the opportunity to ask it and to say, okay, I haven't got work experience yet, or not property work experience, but I've worked in a bar. Okay, what are the skills that I learned here?
Yeah.
You would use in your day-to-day job? I know conflict management, just being representative, smile.
Totally. Ways to talk to different people in different scenarios.
Exactly. Yeah. Working from 9 to 5, probably not in a bar, by the way, not 9 to 5, but certain hours, you need to be there on time.
Yeah, the reliability aspect.
Yeah. You know.
Something you've also said, not to add a fourth point to your 3 points, but I've noticed in the things you've talked about, you've also very much emphasized the importance of a network and sort of having the confidence to build connections, keep in touch with them and reach out to them, particularly for people who are in those early stages of building their career. But then also, obviously, it's still kind of valuable at the stage I am in my career, because they will be, the property lawyers who I will reach out to when a client asks me a difficult question, and I'll go, brilliant, I know just the person. So I think that that's something that people from the start of their career should look at building and leveraging.
Absolutely, and the easiest thing is to start in the classroom with your peers, and too often I see students in a classroom as little groups, little islands, because the other students are just not necessarily the same. They won't be their friends, and they don't have to be your friends, but they're still your network.
Yeah.
If you call them 5 years later, you've got more in common with them than with any random person, because you've sat in the same classroom for 5 years, and you've looked at the same lectures that you either mocked or you loved. Okay. And you can have some stories about it, and those people, more importantly, will sort of grow with you in their career. So by the time that you're in a position to acquire clients, they are probably in a position to give you an assignment.
Yeah, that's really, really good advice. Was there anything else you wanted to add for listeners before we close?
Not really. Maybe I've mentioned the BPA and the FBE and RCS, for instance, and student membership. So for students that might be listening, or for prospective students or mums and dads that they will probably know how it works. Those bodies they basically all have free student membership, and I'm still, let's say, amazed by the very low number of students that actually take those free memberships up and start building that network, or start doing social events, or start doing content-based events, because the BPA and the RCS have as many content-based events, CPD, some sort of CPD events, as they have social events, and that's where you meet people in sort of different capacity, and quite often a very, very nice way of building your network and getting to know some people. And I know students think that's scary. So then just sign up with the two of you. Make sure that you pair up with your best friend or with a little group of 3-4. And if there is an event in either a sports or a social, wine tasting, cheese tasting, jeu de boule, cyclo, there's so many things that I'm sort of picking from the BPA list at the moment. So many nice things to do. I've joined the BPA myself 2-3 years ago, and with one guy from Hartnell Taylor Cook, a bit of publicity. We've started a paddle event, and not paddle boarding, that is, but the paddle tennis.
Amazing! That sounds really hard. I would be immediately into the water.
Yeah. So if you're interested, Abigail, then we'll probably run it again in March, April next.
I'm totally on board. Let me know.
I will. So the opportunity to organize something is there as well. So you're not only on the consuming side of the BPA, but the organizing side, or maybe in 10 years' time even on the board, which is great opportunity on your CV as well. Yeah. So
Nice.
I think nothing necessarily to add to this. I want to thank you for having the opportunity to come on the program and tell a little bit about my career, my life at the moment, and mainly my passion to educate the next generation.
Oh, you're so welcome. It's been amazing talking to you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Property Elite podcast this week. Head to our website to check out our full blog, free and paid support resources and services, free consultation for every single RICS APC and ASOC RICS candidate, and also ask us any questions you have via the website chat blog. See you next week.